Hey, it's Danny from projectmanaverse.com, and in this video I'm going to explain or describe 5 common mistakes when you're working with third parties or vendors or suppliers. So let's jump in. First of all, what's a third party or supplier or a vendor? It's basically an organization or company that is going to produce something for you, be it a product, be it a service, and you're paying them to do something for you. So in the project management context, we often do this when we want to create some new software or buy some software or use some software, or maybe we've already got the software and we're using that vendor, that supplier, to do the support for us. So if we have a problem with that software, we have to give them a call. And then often what happens is once we're using that software, if we want to change it or do a project on it, upgrade it or change it slightly, then we need to bring those vendors or third party suppliers into that project as well. So that's why we use vendors. Why do we do that? Why don't we just do it all ourselves? Well, it usually comes down to just not reinventing the wheel. If you want to use or utilize some kind of software within your company or that has some kind of key functionality, you could create it from scratch, but often there's going to be software out there or applications out there that are already been in the marketplace for many years and they've fine-tuned it and it works really well, it's all optimized. So why not just jump on board and use that rather than trying to start from scratch? So that's often why we do it. So that's the context. Now, as I say, I've worked with many vendors over the years, different vendors. They're all different, but there are similar commonalities and themes I found when working with vendors. And there are some pitfalls that you can fall into. They are easily sprung traps, shall we say, and they can be avoided with a bit of conscious thought and planning from the start, and making sure you set expectations with these vendors from the start, and then you're vigilant with just making sure that these expectations don't fall by the wayside. Okay, so what are the common mistakes then? Let me go into them. Number 1 is that we don't capture detailed enough requirements at the start of the project. As I say, these vendors are often doing something for you, so in order for them to really understand what you want them to do, you've got to give them a set of requirements. I want this, I want this, I want this. It's got to look like this, it needs to do this thing. So you've got your detailed set of requirements. Now, what can happen is you'll give them the requirements, they'll build something, and it's not quite as you wanted. And often, or not often, but I've seen it happen many times when they will say, well, your requirements weren't quite detailed enough. You didn't specify this exact thing, so we haven't done it. And this is a tricky situation because it's very hard to define your requirements exactly as you want it to be right at the start. Often things emerge as you're going through the project and you're going through the design phase, by which time your requirements have already been locked down and signed off. So it's a difficult ask, I know, but you want to put that extra layer of due diligence when you are creating your requirements and giving them to the vendor, making sure everything is very clear. You've done all the stakeholder management on your side within the company to make sure everyone's had their 2 cents to get the requirements right. You've impact assessed them thoroughly. You thought about what it means to all the different areas. Do as much as you can, do more than you usually would, and then when it comes to it, if something has been missed, at least you've covered your own back. But it will ensure that happens less. So make sure you try and do that. That's number 1. Make sure you've got detailed requirements. Going back to that, as a little side note, it's worth understanding that if it's not in the requirements and it needs to be done, and the vendor is saying, well, it's not in the requirements, sometimes they can charge more money to actually do that thing. So you need to be careful, especially if you're on a tight budget, that you don't fall into that situation. So get your requirements nailed down correctly. Number 1. Number 2 is you get too friendly with them and you don't maintain the status quo. So you must remember that the vendor you're paying them, you're their customer basically, so they should be doing everything they can to keep you happy as a customer, and you should be almost like slightly above in the relationship because they're working for you. In a sense, you're paying them, you're the customer, so they've got to give you a good service. When you're in the project environment, you often work with them very closely, you work with their resources, you're on daily calls every day, and it's very easy to form friendships and a good working relationship. But a good working relationship is fine, but you don't want to push it into that friendship zone, because if you do that, when it comes to the crunch and you're really in the project, you need to start being really strict with them and assertive. It's harder to do that when they become your friend. So you need to keep that distance. Don't become friends with them. You can be amicable, you can be professional, you can be courteous and all that good stuff. You have a good working relationship, but don't be too buddy with them, because if they start to fall behind, or you're not getting the results, say, what you want from them, you need to turn up the heat a bit and be a bit more assertive and aggressive. So if you're the kind of person that struggles to do that, and you don't like conflict like I am, then you don't want to get into that situation where you become too buddy with them. So just be careful of that. That's number 2. Number 3 is you don't agree up front exactly what deliverables you need them to produce, especially around the documentation side. So at the start of the project, you need to agree what they're on the hook for delivering, not just the thing they're building, but also all the documents and other things you want to see. So things like end of test reports is a key one. If you are very interested in what testing they have done, then you should be asking for a unit test end of test report, SIT end of test report, all the different phases. And you might even want to see not just the end of test report, but all the scripts they did as well and the evidence they've done, because you can trust them if you want and just say, build me this product, you test it how you want, I don't care what testing you do, all I care about is the product works at the end of the day. Or you might want to be a bit more thorough and just every step of the way just make sure they are testing it thoroughly to your organization's standard. And to be able to ratify that, you need to see evidence of what testing they have done. So if you want that, make sure you agree at the start and it's in the contract that you sign with them. Number 4 is you don't spend enough time detailing the definition of done for those deliverables and any key milestones on the project. So you need to make sure you're doing that so there can be no arguments or unclarity or uncertainty or ambiguity about has that thing actually been done, because often these vendors will attach payments to each of these key milestones or deliverables. So if they're doing that and they say they've done it, and they start asking for payment because they've done it, and you say, well, no, actually, I don't think you have done it, but it's not exactly clear on what done actually means, that can cause conflict on the project and can cause delays, and it can sour the relationship and cause you grief as well. You don't want that. So make sure for every deliverable, what is the actual definition of done? How are you going to define that it's completed? Is it just a certain amount of sign-offs from us? Once we've signed it off, we're happy. If so, what is that sign-off criteria? So just make sure it's clear so you don't get into that situation down the line. Last one is make sure you don't manage their resources too much. This is an easy trap to fall in. I've done it many times. And sometimes it's just the project manager's style, like my style. I like to get if I'm doing a project, I like to take ownership. I like to control the resources. Even if it's a third party, I like to bring them onto my project working group, sometimes form mini working groups with them to just track their progress and talk to them on a daily basis. But technically you shouldn't really do that because they should be managing their own resources. They should have their own project managers managing those resources. So you should really just be corresponding with that project manager or that lead, and they should be doing that part, and you should have the relationship with them. There's pros and cons to both. It's really up to you, but just be careful that you're not falling into that trap and they're just thinking, oh, this is great. The customer is actually doing all the project management for me. I can just sit back and do nothing. So just be careful that doesn't happen. It's a little trap to avoid. Okay, those are the five common mistakes with working with vendors. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this one, just subscribe. And until tomorrow, please take care.